Hello and welcome to another edition of the Workhouse in 20 Objects. And today we're going to be thinking about one particular category of workhouse inmate, those people with various mental difficulties or conditions. There were quite a few of such people in workhouses typically, and we get an idea of what their situation was if we look at the census. Let's take, for example, the Bolton workhouse in 1881, and if we just look at a little section of that census, we can see in the second column from the right, labelled handicap, we got Alice Lomax, who's described as a lunatic, Alice Longworth, lunatic and blind, Priscilla Longworth, imbecile. Further on down we've got Francis Maguire, idiot, and at the bottom Mary Mahon, lunatic. And those were some of the typical names that were in use at the time. Lunatic is someone with a mental illness, and imbecile and idiot were two categories of what we might call intellectual impairment or severe learning difficulties. Idiot was the most severe category, meaning someone who really couldn't protect themselves from physical danger, and imbeciles, a less severe category, people who couldn't protect themselves from what might be called moral danger. You might also see the term feeble-minded in use in some situations. So why would we want to keep such people in a workhouse rather than in an asylum, for example? By the 1880s, county asylums were in operation all across the country, and workhouses could transfer people with such conditions into a county asylum. And the reason typically comes down to money. If a workhouse transferred a lunatic or an imbecile into a county asylum, they had to pay for the upkeep of that individual. And the upkeep of a person in an asylum was rather more than it would have been in the workhouse. So it was financially attractive to keep people, if possible, in the workhouse. And the sort of people who were kept in the workhouse were typically described as things like harmless lunatics. They were no trouble. And in fact, people with learning difficulties or mental illnesses, if they were not too much trouble to look after, they might even be quite useful in the workhouse. Apart from saving money, they could do repetitive work, for example, whitewashing walls or maybe peeling potatoes. They could be quite docile and make a useful contribution to the workforce. So what was involved in keeping a person with mental problems in the workhouse rather than them going off to an asylum, for example? Well, there was a very strict series of decisions that were made involving legal forms, and we've got one here, a typical document. This is the application for an order for detention of a lunatic in a workhouse. And if we take a closer look at this document, so if we start at the top of page 1, the first section is filled in by the relieving officer of the Todmorden Poor Law Union in West Yorkshire, and it concerns an inmate named Ada Wheelhouse, a pauper in the said workhouse, who is or deemed to be a lunatic, and in the opinion of medical officer, a proper person to be so placed. The document is also filled in separately by a medical officer. In fact, there are two, one further on down. So the medical officer is certifying that Ada is, in his opinion, a lunatic and a proper person to be allowed to remain in the workhouse as a lunatic. And he's also noted that it's not necessary for her to be separated from the other inmates of the workhouse. And the grounds he's picked on to justify his support for the application is she is feeble-minded, she can just remember her name, but has no knowledge of her age or anything else. We have another medical practitioner giving his views supporting the application. He says that she is demented, has no memory, and is disoriented of time and place, and unable to give a coherent account of herself. Moving on, we've now, in the latter part of the document, got an order for her detention, and that's been authorised by Magistrate of Justice of the Peace. One little note, if we go back to the first page, is just a little note at the bottom that poor Ada died on the 9th of February 1933, about 7 years later. Workhouses varied in the accommodation they provided for people with mental problems. Some preferred to keep them in dedicated blocks of accommodation and not mix with other inmates. Some, on the other hand, preferred to kind of distribute them amongst the ordinary inmates, as appeared to be the case with Ada Wheelhouse. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and join me again for the next episode in the Workhouse in 20 Objects. Bye for now.